Yeah. Hello, folks, and welcome to a little bit of a special event this time because, as I mentioned, I like to bring people who have a different perspective on events. And Philip is one such specialist that I'm proud to be friends with. And today we're going to talk about crafting stories as a non English writer because Philip is a writer. He's been teaching English too for a while, and now he's helping folks all around the world with this. How are you doing, Philip?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Hey, Cosmin. Yeah, I often get accused of having a different perspective, so that's a nice introduction.
Awesome. First, I like to ask everyone and kind of give people a background about who you are, what you've been doing, where you are now. So please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you've been doing up until now.
Yeah, how to do that briefly? Well, the short answer is I am an author and a writing coach. So that means that I help professional writers to get better opportunities, to get hired, to publish. And the writers that I help specifically are non native speakers because my background is in English teaching. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that we said we're going to talk about today at some point is sort of language and writing and how they fit together. Seems obvious, but it's quite an interesting topic. The longer answer, a little bit more info about me, is I am from Britain. You may be able to tell by my King's English accent. I write short stories mostly. That's my game. I have a few books out and another one coming out soon. What else? I live in the Canary Islands because it's much better than Britain, so I decided
Is
to
it
go
the
there.
weather?
Yeah, that and the bananas, best bananas in the world. Lovely weather. People are
uh,
chilled out. So yeah, lots of palm trees, as you can see in this picture behind me.
mhm.
That's a little bit more about me, really. I guess I am not so much of a gamer, but I love a lot of different creative endeavors. And yeah, happy to be pals with you too.
uh, what I'm really curious and I don't believe I've asked you so far is like how did you get into writing and to teaching people English? Like, what was the spark? Was the thing that told you, all right, this is
Oh,
gonna be something I wanna do?
I love giving this answer because I give the honest answer. Can we swear, by the way, just so I.
I believe it is not safe for work labeled or not. I don't know. Just do you and concern about
I'll
my
keep
channel
it
after.
clean. All right. Yeah, I think a lot of people when they get asked that question, like, "How did you get into teaching?" Give totally bullshit answers. Like, "Oh, I've always dreamed of being a teacher," and the same with writing. "Oh, I was always a writer. Ever since I was a child, I've been writing novels." Maybe that's true for some people, but I think kind of the um, safe for work version, or the not safe for work, but um, the airbrushed answer
That
for
sounds good. I
me.
should say that.
Yeah, the non-airbrushed answer is that I had a sort of quarter life crisis, which is when you reach the age of about 25 and you're at work and you think, oh my God, is this all there is to life? I can't do this. And you do something like quit your job and leave the country. So that's what I did, wanting to travel more. And, luckily I was born as a native English speaker from Britain, which gives me the opportunity to do something like teaching English, which I know makes me quite privileged to be able to do that. But it was a great eye opener and something that I genuinely enjoyed. I sort of took, I mean, the answer is I took up teaching to pay my way, right, on my travels around Latin America and the world. But I didn't go back to my job or my life in the UK because teaching is much more rewarding. So I enjoyed it, carried on with it. And the writing side of things, I'd started a few years earlier. This is sort of back in 2010-ish. And the first thing I properly wrote was a blog about how much I hated my job in advertising. So like no one read it and it was terrible. And it was supposed to be secret. It was like a little secret. this advertising executive is shredding the industry. But I told everyone at work because I wanted somebody to read it. So it was like a secret, non-secret, really crap blog about how rubbish advertising is. And it was a good place to get out lots of words as a newbie. If you write 500,000 words, then you're going to be better at the end of that. And yeah, that sort of morphed into a travel blog. I think I did a creative writing course just before leaving London,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get a bit more interested in that. And yeah, in terms of fiction, I started writing that more seriously in about 2015. Um, I'd met a lot of interesting people on my travels and had a big change in perspective, I think. So that's what influenced my fiction writing. And, I continue writing stories and also, I don't really like the word content, but, blogs and articles that will hopefully be useful for people about writing a language, and also sarcastic carousels on LinkedIn, which feature badgers and take the piss out of creators.
I love those. If you guys didn't check them out, please do. You're gonna enjoy what Philip is putting out, not only in terms of carousels, but also in terms of work that he does. But how did
Maybe
this
unless you're Simon Sinek or, uh, Justin Welch or someone like that.
I'm curious, how did you think about like doing this thing for like non-English writers and ironing the details, so instead of something you did just to pay the bills, it became something that was really what you wanted to do?
I guess there's two parts to that, and again, I'll try to be honest and not give an airbrushed answer. One is I got fed up of English teaching. It's not a very good industry to be in. It's quite predatory and it preys on young people who want to travel, and it's not really a serious career space to be in. There's very little opportunity to move up and to develop your career unless you're, studying for a PhD or something. So basically, I wanted a kind of role where I could work for myself and not for crappy language academies,
Hmm.
which would pay more money than crappy language academies as well. And so around 2018, I was already helping quite a few students and writers um, at that point and writing more seriously. And yeah, around 2018, I switched focus to sort of starting my own business or working for myself.
Hmm.
And yeah, that eventually morphed into what I do now. As for why I help writers, it's just, I mean, it's not a very smart niche to pick, to be honest. Writers out there who are listening, I love you all. Writers are not necessarily the best endowed with money. So it's a
Hmm.
tough niche sometimes. People are trying to rub $10 together to join a course, but it wasn't even a choice for me. It's like, I love writing, talking about it, helping people out. So they just naturally became the people that I felt best placed to help. And, luckily there's not that many people doing what I do, specifically helping non-native writers. There are, thousands of writing coaches and books and courses and copywriting gurus and such. But yeah, I like to think I'm one of the few people who's helping pro writers who have English as a second language. So yeah, that's why it all came about, really.
Hmm. And I'm curious, what are the challenges, for example, when teaching non-English writers to write better? Like, what were some of the first challenges that you encountered when you started doing this?
I mean, I should say, like, I work with people who have a very high level of English, advanced level, C1, C2 generally.
Hmm.
And I mean, the challenge is kind of the same for each student, no matter their language background. There is no hard line. There is no right and wrong with writing, right? It's subjective. And there are some rules and norms with language, but language is also pretty malleable as well, and we can be quite creative with it. So the challenge is like helping clients to deliver work which agrees with those general principles and norms, but still sounds like them and is still their voice. If you are a writer from Brazil, you're going to have a different outlook and a different voice to someone from Japan or from Hungary. And that's great. And the world needs more of that. So rather than being prescriptive and saying, this is how you must write a sentence and a paragraph must look like this, and you cannot do that. Accuracy is important. We have a bit more help with that now with AI. So I kind of focus on, and the challenge is with every student, every client is, yeah, how can we deliver something which is good for readers, good for their audience, while keeping it in their voice. I mean, other typical challenges that they might have are that it takes much longer to write in English than it does in their first language. They can't be as precise because their vocabulary is not as developed. And the accuracy thing is big as well. You make a mistake on an application or a first line um, of a submission, and people don't take you seriously. So all of those things need to be addressed, and I try and help with that. And just another thing. There's a lot of challenges, I guess. Just
Hmm.
another thing is confidence. I think we live in a world where a lot of lazy editors and um, employers who are looking for writers or looking to hire people say things like, "Oh, you have to be from America to apply," or
Hmm.
no non-native writers. They discriminate based on not wanting to filter through uh, a range of writing, not wanting to have to deal with writing which is maybe less accurate because of who wrote it. Um, and so that's a challenge, and it really affects the confidence of some writers. They say, "Oh, well, I'll never be able to earn as much money as someone as a writer from America, or I'll never get published in that magazine, or I'll never get hired by that company." It's utter nonsense. Like any writer around the world, if you have a high enough level of writing skill and of language, you can do. The sky is the limit. You can go anywhere, do anything, publish anything. There are famous writers galore that do not have English as a first language but work in English. So yeah, often I need to help writers just boost their confidence. Say, look, what you're doing is great. You just need to work on these areas and go for it. Like, don't be held back.
Hmm. And from people that you've worked with so far, what is the root cause of this lack of confidence besides what other people say? Like, what do they feel they're missing, or are they missing something to have this confidence that they can write in English and they can do a great job at it?
A few things really. I mean, a lack of. It's that discriminatory background and the cultural um, upbringing of many people in countries which are not top economies, in the global south or in South Asia, for example. They are often brought up under the false idea that they are lesser, that they're not as good, that
Mm.
they you know occupy a position lower than people in the top economy countries. So that's something to overcome. And feedback is the main thing, I think. I mean, people are lacking feedback because even if you're writing English and you're getting good results, you're often not getting feedback on what is working well, why it's doing well, and what you can improve. So writers are just like, well, I don't know if it's good or not. Unless you're being told it's good, you think it's not. You probably, I don't know, do you agree as a writer? You'd be like generally more, unless it's award winning, it's like this is terrible.
Hmm. Um, I'm curious, how do you like help them maybe develop a framework so they can evaluate themselves and say this is good enough, this is a good level, this still gets the message out there, and it's still my voice.
Yeah, I think that depends on what kind of work you're doing. if it's a personal project, if it's something for freelance work or for an employer, you have to do the job. And if your boss is saying, "Hey, I need 3 blog posts today," they can't be absolute bangers that you're going to spend 1 week. You need to do 3 in a day. So I guess, yeah, framework is a good word to use. Putting framework or parameters on the kinds of checks that you can perform, be it accuracy, style, voice, just the structure of things to make sure it's as good as it can be within reason.
Hmm. And transitioning a bit to the stories part, because I believe that's what most people are interested in.
That's why we're
How
here.
that's why you're here. Um, how do things change from writing like blog posts, writing articles to writing something, well, not necessarily huge long form, but something that's more consistent in terms of text?
I think, touching on stories, that's probably a better angle to go with. I think writing creatively or writing narrative is different significantly from writing fu- functional content, functional blogs. And, even if you're writing a sort of how to blog or a listicle that's 3,000 words long, because you need that for SEO, you still might use fairly simple or more mechanical language. With stories, I think the goal is to create the meaning of stories with the reader rather than tell them, right? Like if you go online, you're looking for a how to put this piece of IKEA furniture together. You don't want to be struggling and imagining. You don't want to be participating in like building the meaning of that wardrobe. You want basic telling language, which is like step one, get the spanner. Step two, put it, attach this to that. So yeah, with stories, I think the difference is the level of language that you need to be able to write sentences, paragraph structures, even words in a way which is more creative, and to be a master of um, switching things like parts of speech. Right, we want to use less nouns and more verbs, but we really need all of these different verbs. We need really specific ones to be able to show the reader something bigger. So yeah, that's my sort of initial thoughts on how creative writing of stories is different, what kind of skills it needs.
Hmm. And how did you start writing like stories? How did you find this passion, and what helped you in your initial journey of figuring out how the hell do I write stories?
Yeah, good question. I think I mostly write short stories, and as a young man and a kid, I didn't understand short stories. We were often in the UK anyway. We're often like fed movies and novels which have a particular structure, and we're like, "What's the point in a short story? It's too short. It's too short. It ends too soon. What happens next?" Whereas actually the structure of it is completely different. The reader is left to imagine what happens before and after a lot more and create that kind of meaning. Yeah, as for what helped me, I don't think I'm going to say anything earth shattering here, but reading a lot and learning to read in an analytical way, which is something I help clients with as well, which is not just reading to consume something, but like reading it and enjoying it as you would any storybook, and then reading it again, but asking a lot of questions like, why
Hmm.
is the writer doing that? Why have they put that in that place? If you really enjoy a sentence or a description or some dialogue really sounds natural, that's cool. Go back and read it again and ask why. Like, exactly what is it about the language that has been used? Because it always comes down to that language. And then trying to replicate that basically. If you want to write a story in a similar vein to someone or a character that's similar to one that you've read, then we just take things from all over the place and put them together to create our own work. Nothing's completely made up. So yeah, reading in an analytical way, I think, is important. And all of the how tos and the craft tips, the stories for narrative, I think those are useful, but don't do it all at once. Don't buy three how-to books and try and read them back to back. It's like you have to deal with little problems as they come along. Like, you might hear a tip about reducing the number of ing verbs, right? You don't want the page littered with ing verbs because it just doesn't sound very nice in English. It's a bit repetitive. And it can quite possibly happen because we have like adjectives and verbs and probably other, yeah, I mean, I guess it could be a noun too, with ing. So it can crop up a lot. And if you think, oh, yeah, that's a good tip, just add that in, right? Don't think, oh, now I need another 80 tips like that and learn them all at once. Just add it into your repertoire and try and pay attention to it, put it on a list, note it down. So yeah, reading in an analytical way, and finally not doing it all at once, not trying to improve your craft all in one sitting. It does take time.
Sometimes years. I'm curious if you've ever read the book How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. Did you get the chance to read that one?
I haven't. No, that sounds like something I would like. So
Because they were going through the entire process of reading the book, not really just for the sake of it, just to let it make an impression on it, but rather understand what's being talked about in it. So at first you just read it for the sake of it, then you kind of underline what's really interesting, you even ask yourself questions and write them down or note down main ideas, and then you read it again and you just keep reading. Like, I don't know. I think, as you said, we should approach reading in a more analytical way, especially as writers, and to understand what works, what not, and why. Like, why does this certain phrase or this certain book leave an impression within me?
yeah, I mean, I just wonder if you want to connect it to the gaming narrative. Like, how is there a way that you think writers can do that in the gaming world to view, like, take a bird's eye view of the structure of a game narrative, or to zoom into like really cool parts and analyze that and say, why is it so great and why did I love it? And how can I do something similar?
Hmm. Like, my vision is a little bit different. For For transparency, I'm not a narrative writer at the moment. We might have people in chat who are better at this job. I highly praise you folks. You are doing God's work with what you're doing. Like, I do write, like, I believe I've started 3 novels. One just a few days ago. Never finished one, but at some point I will. And I wrote a lot of poetry. But how I like to think about it, at least in gaming, is you shouldn't approach it as only books can help you understand how to build a world, how to build characters, or build an environment. In my opinion, at least how I see it, is just a sum of experiences. For example, if I've seen an animated series where I liked how the plot was presented, maybe I can integrate that. If I've seen a TV show and I really liked how this character was built and the way the author built it, maybe I can integrate that into my writing. Like, you can see that even on my social media writing, I just like to integrate stuff from one industry or one environment or one medium and incorporate it into another. I believe that's how writers should approach it. Just get creative, don't just stay into writing books, writing books, and also reading books, sorry, and also read quality books, not some like I got this advice a few days ago from someone who is writing their own book and they are a narrative designer. If you really want to improve at this craft, just read the classics, the folks who were the best at their craft, who really invented the genre. For example, if you want to learn how to write tragedy, go to Shakespeare, read Shakespeare, understand that, you know.
Yeah, good advice. I think definitely agree with you on getting a variety of input and really observing it in fine detail rather than just consuming it. We're consumers of media constantly now, but you have to, if you want to write and create, um, you've got to be very observant on little details, and you have to be able to translate it. So if you want to translate like an incredible um, moonscape or spacescape that you've seen in an animated series into writing, that's where you need these skills of like, well, it's presented visually on screen, but we need to present it in small pieces that allow the reader to build that picture when we write. One typical error that I see is like a big long description where it's just been chucked onto the page and it's not carefully presented. When we look at an image of a planet on a screen, we can see it all at once. We can see 1,000 different things at once. That's why they say, an image is 1,000 words. But in a description, in a narrative, and I don't know whether narrative writers would be writing sort of um, word-based descriptions or if they would be showing them somehow. But yeah, it's to present things like little by little, so that the reader is sort of the viewer, and they're looking at one thing. Oh, okay, I've seen that, and I can imagine something bigger now. And look over here, and there's this one thing. You don't have space to. You could write an entire book to describe one picture, right? But
Hmm.
you don't have space to do that, so you have to let the reader do a lot of the work. And learning how to do that, I think, is a key skill and
Hmm.
an example of how we need to translate uh, what we observe into writing.
Hmm. How do you approach descriptions when you have to write one so the reader you leave it to the reader's imagination but still make sure that they're on the right track, like they get the bigger picture, the smaller details they can figure them out or they can imagine it themselves.
Yeah, it's presenting one or two key details that allow, I mean, firstly, being specific rather than general. If you say, like, oh, there were loads of clothes on the floor, it's like, what do you see? Do you see a picture? No, it's quite vague, right? Just a bunch of clothes. What colors are they? What kind of clothes? If you say, there was a spotlight shining down onto a green silk dress hanging in the middle of the room, oh, I can see that as a key image. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is give this example that I like of a Hemingway description, I think, where he describes a man. Uh, and only description we get of this man is that he was a smart man with smart hair. He was a smart man with smart hair. And from that, it's so sparse. And the fact that it's only his hair, I can imagine exactly who that guy is because I'm building it in my mind. If he gave too much more description, would be, or he described something that wasn't that important. He was wearing a tie. So, well, so what? But if he had smart hair, he's very particular about how he does his hair. And I imagine he's got sort of pomade or brill cream and he's very like anal and a sort of accountant wearing a trench coat, carrying a briefcase. We can imagine a tie. Um, so, yeah, so it's about choosing a key detail, I think, and allowing the reader to imagine other ones.
Hmm. I'm curious if you've ever got the chance to write something that made it into media, for example, some script or some part of a story that was represented visually.
Trying to think if any of my stories have been represented visually. I don't think so, not off the top of my head. I'm
Hmm.
always having conversations with like animators, and I did a book project recently called 21 Futures, which is the world's first Bitcoin fiction anthology. And yeah, we're talking with people about making all of these stories into short films and animations, which would be cool. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that I've done anything that was
Mm-hmm.
filmed.
And how did the chats go like with animators? Because it's interesting to understand how the dynamic is between a writer and someone who is more, let's say, visually gifted and wants to transpose words into a visual form. Like, how did the discussions go?
I mean, I think animators and film execs and people like that are generally very enthusiastic and excited. Like if they get a story, they think, "Oh, this is real." They're the cogs in their brain, and from the meetings I've had, the cogs in their brains are just whizzing away, thinking, "Oh well, how can I translate this into my medium?" I'm not an expert in visual storytelling, but they are, and I can write something on a page, and we would work together. Mostly they though would translate that into a visual medium. So they're generally very excited, and then the conversation comes to funding and money, and that's often where like they sort of say, "Who's paying for this?" And we're like, "Well, we don't know exactly, but we'll try and figure it out." And then things stall. So that's generally what happens with like films getting made or not. I think.
Hmm. Would you like at some point
Probably
to
probably with games as well, right? Is that people say, "I've got this great idea for a game. Here it is. I've written it all up." Yeah, who's paying for this?
a few indie studios would go through that because since they have smaller funding, smaller budgets, they would need to think about budget and all that. But would you ever want to get some of your work animated or I don't know made into a movie? How does that idea sound for you? Or maybe into a game?
Game. Yeah, that's a great question. I would like that. Obviously, I'm not so egotistical to need a movie and to want to go to the premiere and that kind of stuff. Because I write short fiction, I would really love to see something as a short film. I'm a big fan of Love, Death and Robots, the Netflix
Hmm.
series, because Netflix is one of the few platforms that can actually put out short film, and no one else can because it's not commercial. It doesn't make money. You can't put it on network TV. You can't sell it at cinema. People aren't going to pay for it. But Netflix has done these sorts of short films, which are it's an anthology show. They're not connected in any way. So to see these Bitcoin stories or any others that I have been a part of and written on screen would be great. And I think I would also defer judgment on a lot of it. Like, when it comes to my publishers saying, what do you think about this cover? I'm sort of like, well, I have ideas, but that's your expertise. And I would prefer to leave that to you. So I think it would be the same with a studio or animators saying, you guys or girls know how to translate this best. And it would be nice to be consulted on some things, but I wouldn't expect to be pulling the strings and sort of
Hmm.
for it to be my film. It's a film that is would be based on a story. With a game, that would be mind blowing to be able to participate and sort of move your character around and change the narrative. I think, I said at the beginning, I'm not really a gamer, I'm not really involved in the space, but I think that is the ultimate power of story based games is that when a book asks the reader to create some of the meaning, they do so. But in a game, you can do it right there and then by moving the character around, by making a choice. And you can go back and redo it in a different way. It's a really powerful medium, and I can see why it's getting bigger and bigger.
Hmm. Changing the register a bit, like how do you get inspired to write some of your work, or when you are searching, let's say, for inspiration or sources to document yourself, where are you looking at, what are you looking at, and why?
Various different ways. I try not to look for inspiration. I think if you sort of sit down at a computer and think, "Oh, what can I write about?" You'll end up staring at a blank page. So it's a good idea to have a process of collecting ideas and letting them sit for a long time and revisiting them, and then saying, "Oh yeah, which ones are exciting me? Oh, this I really want to write this one." But the other 19 that are on the page, I'm not that bothered, or they're probably not going to be the stories that you write. So yeah, doing that, and I guess the inspiration can come from uh, an event, a person, a certain character that you've met, a place that you've been. I got quite inspired doing a lot of traveling by different locations and different people that I met. So they, in fictionalized or morphed forms, found their way into some of my stories. Um, and the other things that can give you inspiration are like a what if situation. So it's a good starter for a story or even a game. What if, what if the Earth was attacked by this kind of alien, or what if, a CEO had a rough day and ended up, I don't know, jumping out of this. It's not a very good game, is it? Uh, Bad example. Scratch that one. A what if situation is a good way to start a story. And yeah, the other one is just things that I want to write about. I often give this example. Like I sort of quite like some country music, and I I just love the storytelling aspect behind it, and like salt of the earth, folksy kind of people in the states who hang around in that scene. So I thought I want to write a story about a country singer. Maybe I'd seen some films that inspired that, and I've been listening to music, and I just want to do it. So that became something that I was going to write about, and the story went from there.
Hmm. And do you have a way to sort of like open yourself to being inspired? For example, you are just I don't know, you're just walking through the city and you realize that isn't cool detail, and all of a sudden you get an idea like how do you become open about being inspired?
Yeah, I like that idea. I think some people are more likely to be open to inspiration and able to observe fine details, and other people have different skills. So I think it's in some people a skill which is a bit more inbuilt, or they're more likely to have it. I guess you can develop it just by being curious and asking why. Also, things like expanding the parameters of your thinking outside of the now is important. So if you go and visit a castle, I remember this. I was in Morocco, right, and I was sort of visiting the Sultan's castle or whatever. People were queuing up, taking their photo, and then buggering off after 2 seconds. And I was like, "Why? You're taking a photo of some ruined walls and an old castle. Um, what did you get out of that?" Whereas I thought it would be nice to imagine back. These walls have been standing for 2,000 years or 1,000 years. Like, imagine the people that have been here. How did that mark get there? What kind of events happened here? It's just casting your mind outside of what you immediately see, and whether that's with places, people, events, sensory information. I think you can expand that in terms of time and scope, and that can help tell a story which happens over time, right? Stories can't happen in no time, I think.
I guess it depends on who you ask. What guru with six-figure businesses that is writing stories you ask, you know?
Stories versus storytelling is another one that kind of winds me up a bit, because I think storytelling is a word that's been co-opted by the gurus to sell, being able to tell a story. And it's like storytelling just makes me think of crappy fake. LinkedIn posts and marketing and stuff like that. It's like, what about stories? That's what humans want and need and like is stories, not the skill of storytelling.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we're kind of perverting the terms. Like everything that's good, that's nice. People just take it into business because it sounds cool, and they are perverting it in such a way that it becomes meaningless.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things I like about the writing community in general is that really it seems the the only way to truly monetize being a writer. And I say this because many bestsellers and famous writers and award winners have teaching jobs at American universities to make ends meet or to, make big bucks. And, teaching and helping other writers is the primary way that writers make ends meet. Creative writers, I should say, more than like non-fiction writers. And it's good because we're helping each other out. And, hopefully it's not all about, grow your business to reach six figures so you can tell other people how to do the same and just get involved in this big pyramid cycle. So yeah, I think there's more good about the writing community than a lot of other industries which are quite money focused or grabby because I don't know if oil, for example, is something that's inherent in human need and nature. We don't really need oil. We sort of developed the taste for it over centuries, whereas stories, well, that's something that we like physically need, mentally anyway,
Mhm.
um, to build relationships and to make any kind of meaning in this world. We need to understand narrative, and like that's how we're uh, built differently.
Mhm. And do you have folks who come to you specifically to help them understand how to write stories or to understand structure, to understand how they can get their inspiration from? Do you get people that come to you specifically for stories, is what I'm trying to say.
Not so much at the moment because it's not what I focus my business on. I have done in the past. I do things like give creative writing workshops sometimes live. I used to do like a creative writing workshop online, and I have had some clients who are like writing books, and yeah, occasionally it does happen. But I guess my focus is on helping writers more with the nuts and bolts of functional writing because I'm going to contradict myself here because I was like, oh, I'm not somebody who just wants to help you reach six figures and get this great business. But what motivates people to improve is that they're going to get something out of it. So, you know, my clients will be able to get a great job out of it or be able to present improved results to their boss and get promoted or get published somewhere that they hadn't been before, and that's what they want. So um, generally, you get that more with functional writing
Mm-hmm.
and non-fiction writing than you do with creative writing.
Mm-hmm. If you if you had to give people like free tips, or maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. You decide how many on how to start like this fictional writing journey. What would those be?
Like what approach to take or how to write a good story?
You can answer both. Thanks for helping out.
What approach to write in a in your sorry, what approach to take in a journey of writing stories and writing fiction? Um, I mean, I don't think it would be that different from what I've already said about reading. I mean, to improve any skill, you need to do three things, and that is practice first and foremost. If you don't practice, you don't do the skill, you don't improve.
Hmm.
Um, So write lots of stories. I think Ray Bradbury said, write a story week for a year. You got 52 stories. And story 52 is sure as hell going to be better than story one. And sounds simple, but it's right. So there's that, there's practicing, there's getting feedback. You need to get feedback. There are various ways to do that for free if you don't have the means to hire an editor, to work with a coach, or to take a course or anything like that. If you want to get serious about getting your work assessed and you want to make gains quicker, it's generally a good idea to get professional feedback, I would say. But there are ways that you can do it by buddying up with writers and swapping critiques, or using certain websites that serve that purpose as well. And the third thing is to learn. Is to learn something new, right? If you just keep practicing and getting feedback and practicing and getting feedback, you're just perfecting what you can already do. But in the world of writing, there's changes, shifts, constant new techniques, and so many little tips and tricks that you can incorporate. You need to keep learning those as well. So that's where the following the right people, or reading about writing craft can help, or maybe taking a course, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think, what was the second part of that question? How do you write good stories?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'll get back to you when I found out. Just kidding. I think a typical thing for writers when they start, and I'm not sure if this is true of writers in the gaming community, because it's probably more quest based or action based. So there's stuff happening all the time and there's conflict. But a typical problem with a lot of writers who start out is they want to write something beautiful. Just want to write something that people are, so beautiful. That's you really can write, but nothing happens, and that's because there's no conflict. So you have to be really mean to your characters and give them a phobia of fire, and then put them up a tree and set the tree on fire. And they've also got to save their beloved cat, who is the only thing in the world that's they love, and the cat is also up the tree, and the cat sets on fire, and all this horrible stuff is happening. And that's when we start to root for characters, and stories get interesting. So make sure to add enough conflict, difficulty. Don't make things too easy, right? Don't make Superman come along and save the cat, because I should say there's a book called Save the Cat as well, which is like a writing craft book that I haven't actually read, but I think that's the general premise of the book. Is like, in the first 5 minutes, like, put a cat in danger, and then people care, and they're like, oh, well, let's save the cat. But yeah, don't make Superman come along and put the fire out, because like then the main character didn't take an action. It was too easy. It was like, oh cool, well, everything's good now. Or if your character's goal is to like defeat the Goblin King, don't give him a gun and then he just shoots the Goblin King. It's like, cool, done. Let's go back home and enjoy life now. So, well, that was a boring story because it was too easy. You got to make the Goblin King immune to bullets, and then he turns into sort of a transformer who can fight back. And the main character is suffering more and more
Mm-hmm.
setbacks. And another key facet of stories is change. And it's true whether it's a story that you write for social media, like the fake ones when people talk about them being really scared before giving a speech or something like that. The Whether it's for that, whether it's for game, whether it's for a short story, a novel that you're writing, is there needs to be real change with the characters. They try a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, and they fundamentally change. They change their view, they change their relationships with people, they change how they see the world in order to solve the problem and get where they want. So I think those are the two key facets, that whatever your story is, it needs them. conflict and change, and in the main character. And I think when you start out, it's easy to forget that, right? You just think, oh, I'm busy writing, and I'm developing this beautiful forest that I'm writing about. It's like, well, who cares unless it's on fire and
Mhm.
the robotic Goblin King is causing havoc.
That's a story I expect to write from you in a few weeks. You've got some work to do, Philip.
Well, maybe there's someone listening, and we can make it straight into the game version.
Perfect. If
Beat
there's an
the
indie developer, Philip's got some great ideas.
Well, you
Um,
could just go to versus, right? That's a movie idea. Transformers versus Goblins. Easy. That would do. It'd be
um,
featured on the Sci-Fi Channel, I think.
all right. If Michael Bay is watching, call us. If you know Michael Bay. All right. I think some of the challenges like people go through when they are writing narratives for games is what can the game actually do, like you mentioned, it would be so nice to have control of your own character from the story and do certain things, but sometimes that's not possible because of some technical limitations at the end of the day. So some that's what I've heard from other narrative designers. So you have all these cool ideas, you want them bundled up together, you want this great story to become alive, and then you have a developer that tells you, in fact, we can't do that.
Yeah, I think the things that excite me about like games and the the narrative in games is choice. It's the you writing the story as you go along, and you may understand that there are certain predetermined choices that you can make, but I think successful narrative games probably play on the morality of
Mhm.
choices, right? As I said, I'm not a big gamer, but I instantly loved Grand Theft Auto, all versions of it, because you just get to be the bad guy and you get to cause havoc when it's not, possible in real life. You're fulfilling that kind of dark fantasy that I think exists in most people.
Mhm.
And in these narrative tree games, you get a moral choice. Do you make friends with this traveler that you encounter, or do you kill them and take their money? And that those moral choices or ethical choices will affect your success and your path down the line.
Mhm.
And I think how that tallies up allows game players to really try and imagine this complex tree of where they're going, what they're doing. I guess in these games, so you've got aspects like observation and skill added into it as well. So you have skill based. Um, sorry about the noise if you can hear that. Yeah, you have skill things that you need to do to uh, complete a certain challenge, and observation is like to scour a room to find an item that you need for to complete a future quest or to escape that particular area of the game. So yeah, those are the things for me. Is like moral choice is probably the big one, and I guess that's just on the size of the narrative decision tree. If it gets bigger and bigger, and how it all connects is it's a feat of engineering, and I
Mhm.
think that's what makes something
You kind of
pretty.
hit the nail on the spot because, well, I know you're not playing that much stuff, but I believe that's what we're losing in the game industry. Like a lot of the great games that are telling stories focus around these moral dilemma, or this choice system where your choice is not just something on the moment, but it can possibly branch into future decisions or into future outcomes. And I believe that's what we're lacking a lot, at least in our industry at the moment, the ability to just include choices that have real impact. And I believe that's something that's also crucial for stories like Don't just mention that somebody kills someone and that's it, but having the possibility of that someone being related to a character in the future.
Yeah, I think, some of the cutscenes that I've seen in games are sometimes a little bit ham-fisted because they're very telly. They're very telling the audience, oh, hey, remember that guy died, or oh, remember your mission is to do this. And it's like, as a gamer, you're like, oh, I know, or like, you don't need to tell me, like, show me. That's maybe typical writing advice, but sometimes they're a bit ham-fisted and a bit too obvious, I would say.
Hmm. Oh, it's been a great chat with you, Philip, and I feel like I've really learned a lot for my own writing journey. And now I'm curious.
Don't go
Go
Don't
ahead.
go stealing that. That's what I was going to say. Don't go stealing that idea. That's that's my
The
intellectual property.
the
It's
Goblin King one.
trademarked, copyrighted. Transformers versus Goblins
Oh, perfect. It's all yours. I
slash
mean, I am a fan
Goblin
of
King.
Transformers, so at some point maybe we can do a partnership or something like that, or a collab.
Yeah. Once Bay gets involved, we'll have a
Yeah, there's gonna
meeting.
be explosions. Uh, um, but anyways, if people feel like they can also learn a thing or two from you regarding functional writing, maybe story writing, or I don't know, maybe some mix that they can see and I cannot, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me all over the shop: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Look for English Writing Coach. That is my sort of brand name. And where else? Oh, I should mention my community as well. I run a paid community for multilingual writers where we all have fun together and post memes, but also there's tons of practical writing advice and loads of resources and courses that you can take part of. So if you are out there and you're somebody who has a high level of English and you're working in English, but it's not your first language, and you think that that is something you want to work on and improve your writing skill, then come along and join us. You can find information on that on my website, englishwritingcoach.uk.
You guys have the link in the chat as well in case you might be interested in. So thanks a lot, Philip, for being together with us today and telling us a bit about your story, a bit about how you are writing, how you are approaching writing, and all in all giving us useful advice.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun, as always. Love chatting with you, Cosmin, and yeah, all the best in your quest to chat to more interesting writers and people in the gaming industry.
There are a lot of folks I'm sure you're gonna love if you ever come across any of them. But that's it, folks, for today. Uh, I sound like Porky Pig right now. That's all, folks. If you didn't get the chance to see this one, or maybe you know someone that wants to see this chat with Philip and might get some value out of it, remember that these sessions are going to be recorded. So as soon as I manage to get them out of Twitch, you're gonna see them on LinkedIn. Don't worry if you missed it or a friend missed it. They're gonna be somewhere where they can see it. Outside of that, thanks guys for watching and have a great day or night.